My name is Joe Cress, and I am a technical implementation specialist here at Trava. This video is intended to give more of a deeper dive into the control panel, explain some features, what information we're going to need to start the scans, and things like that. So again, popping into your dashboard, very, very easy to use. You're going to have your most top priority things here that you may want to fix sooner rather than later. You can actually dive into each one, find out the details of why it's blacklisted, for example, and then you could take actions to possibly remove it from the blacklist, or just say that's something that you don't have control over and you're not going to be able to fix. Moving right along to vulnerabilities. We went over this a little bit in the first video, but it's super easy to start a new vulnerability scan. Just simply click here, start vulnerability assessment. I'll quickly go over each different scan type, give you a little background of what information is going to be needed. The first thing to note is if you want that scan to be active, you will want to change this radio button to active for each scan. So beginning with the external scan, the information we're going to need are IP addresses. So if you have a server in your office that is accessible to the outside internet, you'll want to put that IP address in here. If you have a VPN running at the office, things like that. If you have a lot of infrastructure in the cloud, you'll want to put those IP addresses in here just so we can kind of scan those IPs, look for open ports. If any of those ports have services running on them that are vulnerable, that's the type of information that's going to come from this scan. Next up is the certificate scan. So you'll want to put in any IP addresses associated with your organization, also any domain name, so xyz.com, for example, any websites you may run, put that in there as well. And what this scan is going to do is it's going to reach out, ensure there's an SSL certificate installed on those IPs or those domains, and make sure the ciphers are up to date and secure. And moving right down to the dark web, you will want to enter your own domain in here. So xyz.com, for example. And what this scan is going to do is it's going to reach out to the dark web and scan for any email addresses associated with that domain that have maybe been part of a hack in the past, or they've gained access to that email address. That's going to kick back in the results that xyz at xyz.com has shown up, and there possibly has been a malicious attack or password sharing or things like that. And you'll want to input that there and change that to active from inactive. And I will show you some of the results from that as well. It also looks for malicious IP addresses and blacklisted IPs. Moving down to the cloud scan. So this is going to scan your cloud environment at these three different providers. So for AWS, you're going to need a AWS key ID and an AWS secret key in order to input that account. The other two, you just need to download the JSON file from the control panels and upload it here. All of the credentials are going to be security auditor type credentials. So it's just a security scan. We're not changing any of your data or anything like that. And you can click on the appropriate one that you're using. For example, where are my AWS credentials? You're going to get a document popped up on how to generate those credentials, and also the same for the other two as well. Moving down, we also have an agent scan. So what this is it is an agent installed on, for example, your employees' machines. So if you have a bring your own device program, or you issue machines to your employees, we can install this software, rather you can install this software. And what it's going to do is it's going to scan software packages, make sure there's no vulnerable software installed, basic information like that. There's not going to be any personal information scanned, so we're not seeing their browser history, passwords, or anything like that. It's simply checking software packages and checking for vulnerabilities on that machine. And right now we have 4 different types of agent software. So we have Microsoft Windows, and there's instructions here, Mac OS, also Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and Debian. If you have any problems or questions installing these, please reach out to support. support@travasecurity.com, and we can absolutely assist. Moving on down, we have a web application scan. So if you have a custom built web application to search for people or do anything with your database or anything at all, rather, we can scan that web app, look for vulnerabilities with iframes, jQuery being way out of date, things like that. You don't have to give us a username and password, but you're more than welcome to. And we do typically recommend your web app be in a sandbox environment. We can absolutely scan production. We don't anticipate any issues, but generally speaking, being in a sandbox is much better. Moving on, we have the Microsoft 360 scan. So this is going to scan your 360 setup to make sure it's secure, make sure there's no vulnerabilities in the configuration. And we just need a client ID, tenant ID, and client secret. And again, where are my credentials is listed right there. So you can click that and it gives you very detailed instructions on how to generate those credentials. And down in Trava Labs, some of these options are not available depending on your package you have with Trava, but if you reach out to your account executive, they can give you much more information, or email support and we can direct you to the right person. But we have internal vulnerability and internal discovery. Those are going to scan your internal networks, look for any vulnerable services that are open, typical things like that. The discovery is looking for devices that you may not know are on your network. Those are going to be displayed with the internal discovery. And finally, WordPress. If you use WordPress for your website, for example, we can scan that for known WordPress vulnerabilities with themes, plugins, WordPress core. We can do all those scans for you. And you can also schedule these scans. So you can just run the scan now. You can run it later, select a date and time. So if you want to run the scan at 3 o'clock in the morning on Sunday morning, that can be arranged. You can also set up it to be a repeating scan. So if you want it to scan every 30 days, for example, you can set that up here. And when you go back here, we'll kind of go over the results of this scan. Again, this was a purposely insecure environment that has since been decommissioned, but we wanted to leave it in place so you can see some of the results. So as you can see, this has 821 results, so we're not going to go through all of them. But at the top, it gives you a very high-level overview of what the scan results look like. So your external scan had a 3.0, which is a little bit high. The web app had a 2.7, dark web had a 2.6, and the certificate scan had a 2.6. Now on this scan, we didn't scan any cloud environments. We just did external, web app, dark web, and certificate. In the middle, you have your graph to show you where your current risk level is. So this one's about middle of the road for this scan. And to the right, you can easily discern what the general ranking was for the vulnerabilities. So as you can see in this scan, a vast majority of the vulnerabilities were moderate. As you scroll down, you're going to get a list of all 821 results. Obviously, that is a lot of results to go through. So you'll definitely want to filter them by severity, potentially, or scan type. So you can drop down the scan type and say you only want to look at web app results. And that's going to give you the web app scan results for this scan. And you can drill down into them. So for example, this one had a vulnerability in the JavaScript library, session cookie, path-based vulnerabilities are all listed there. And it is important to know that when you open these, you can actually see all of the details. If it has a CVE attached to it, it'll be listed here, and that will open in a new tab so you can read about the particular vulnerability that you're looking at. We want to go down to external. So this one, for example, has a TLS padding Oracle vulnerability, which is Zombie Poodle and Golden Doodle. And as I was talking about, the CVE is listed right there that you can click on, opens in a new tab and read about it, read the severity, maybe if you've already mitigated it through another piece of software, and you can take that data and use it how you'd like. Moving on to the dark web. So this domain did not have any email addresses found, but if you did, they would be listed here. The only thing that this dark web scan has resulted in is displaying some blacklisted IP addresses, which gives you the information. So for example, this one was blacklisted by the Honeypot project. And then you have a lot of information on same subnet blacklisted IPs. Sometimes it's very challenging to mitigate these if you don't actually own the IP addresses, but you can always submit the request to your provider or the specific provider listed here where it was blacklisted and try to get it removed. And finally, for this scan, we're going to look at the certificates. So in this one, it just had an insecure cipher on one of them, which is fairly low priority. Obviously, it is a vulnerability, though, and you will want to investigate. And that is an overview of the assessment results. Obviously, everybody's going to have different results. If you need some assistance interpreting these, definitely reach out to your account executive or support@travasecurity.com. Moving over to controls, as you can see, some of these have already been started. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but to start a new one, start a new control survey, select the appropriate survey you want to start, and just go through and answer the questions to the best of your ability through the different controls. It is very important to be as accurate as possible with this. We want to look at what it is right now, not what you're anticipating it to be in 30 or 60 days. That'll give you a good baseline on where you need to start. Moving on to social engineering, this is where you can set up your phishing campaigns. So as I was saying in the first video, you will want to add all of the employees at your organization. So if you just have 2 or 3, it's very easy just to enter them manually. But if you have quite a large number of them, you will want to import a CSV file. And we can give you a CSV template on what's needed for that, but that can import them all at once. And then once you have all that imported, you'll simply want to start a social engineering campaign. You will want to name your campaign and then select the appropriate template, whichever one you want to use, whichever one you think will be most successful in your organization. So Amazon, for example, Google Drive, Google Calendar, very popular ones, Starbucks, Zoom is another very popular one as well. One important thing to note is you will need to whitelist some information inside of your email service or your end customer's email service. And this is the information for that. If you don't input this information as whitelisted, the phishing emails may end up in the spam folder and people may not see them at all. So you may not get the data that you want. But once these are whitelisted, they will show up in the person's inbox. And I also recommend sending a test email to yourself once you get everything whitelisted to ensure it all shows up properly. But once you have all of that selected, hit next. And you'll want to select the appropriate people or person you want to send this to. I'm going to send it to myself as an example. You can run it now. You can schedule it to run at a later date and also select an end date and end time for when you want this campaign to be finished. And once you select all the information and click save, it will either kick off immediately or kick off at the date and time that you selected in the future. And I do have some results from a phishing campaign over here. You can see this first campaign here was run back in October, but this is what it'll look like once you have campaigns that have run. And you can click here and view results. Across the top, you're going to have a vulnerability scale. Obviously, this one is a critical because it's sent out one email and that person clicked on all of the links. To the right, you'll have the stats. So this campaign was 100% sent. So everybody in the organization would have received it. It's 100% opened. So the one person that this test was sent to, that person opened the email and read it. Also, this single person clicked the link in the email, which is obviously not ideal situation. And this person also did not report the email as spam through their email provider. So what this information tells you is this individual does need some training on what is a phishing attempt and what is a legitimate email. But that's really what this is for, is to understand a larger picture of that organization to see if there's further training needed. And also, so you can update the users. So you can add your MSP, for example, or an IT director, your organization, and give them access. You can also revoke their access very easily, reset their password, or just edit the user. And finally, your client info. This is going to be the information for this account or your end client's account. Typical information, industry, so on and so forth. This is very self-explanatory. So that is a lower level overview with all of the details, the scans. If you have any questions about anything in the dashboard that you've seen, you can reach out to your account executive or email support@travasecurity.com, and we will connect you with the right person or assist you with your questions. So thank you very much and enjoy your day.